The sun burned white-hot over the Colorado plains, turning the air into a shimmering veil of heat. In the distance, a lone rider approached through waves of dust, his silhouette growing larger against the endless sky. The year was 1873, 3 years after the Transcontinental Railroad had stitched the country together with iron and blood. But out here, in this forgotten corner of the frontier, the only law that mattered was the one backed by gunpowder and lead. Sometimes death isn't the worst thing on this frontier. Sometimes it's just the beginning of a real hell. A gunshot echoed across the valley, startling a flock of crows into flight. The sound hung in the air like a promise of violence to come. 50 yards ahead, a small cabin stood in the shadow of a rocky outcrop, smoke still rising from its chimney. But it wasn't the cabin that caught Ethan Cole's attention. It was the woman tied to the corral post, her skin blistered from hours under the merciless sun. Ethan dismounted, the leather of his saddle creaking beneath him. At 45, his face was a map of hard years and harder choices. The war had etched lines into his forehead, and the decade that followed had only deepened them. He adjusted the twin Colt Navy revolvers at his hips, meticulously maintained 1851 models with custom walnut grips, before reaching for the Yellow Boy Winchester propped in his saddle holster. "Ma'am," he called out, approaching cautiously, scanning the perimeter with the practiced eye of a man who'd spent too many years expecting ambushes. When the woman lifted her head, her cracked lips formed two words that Ethan had to strain to hear. "Open it." "With force!" Her voice was raw, barely a whisper. Blood had dried around the ropes binding her wrist to the post. Ethan cut her free with his hunting knife, catching her as she collapsed forward. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd thought, maybe 30, with determination burning behind her exhaustion. "Name's Ethan Cole," he said, supporting her weight as he led her toward the cabin's shade. "Who did this to you?" The woman clutched at something hidden beneath her torn blouse. "Sarah," she managed, her voice strengthening slightly. "Sarah Blackwell." Inside the cabin, Ethan lowered her onto a chair and poured water from his canteen. Using skills learned on battlefields where doctors were scarce, he examined her injuries: dehydration, rope burns, and something more concerning, a bullet graze along her ribs, partially hidden by her clothes. "You've been shot," he said, reaching for the medical supplies in his saddlebag: iodine, clean bandages, and a needle and thread he'd boiled just yesterday. Sarah winced as he cleaned the wound. "Not the first time someone's tried to kill me," she said, her eyes fixed on his face as if measuring his trustworthiness. "And Vaughn Blackwood won't stop until I'm dead or worse." "Blackwood?" The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Memories flashed: his younger brother Daniel's face, a funeral in the rain, an empty grave because they'd never found the body, just a blood-stained hat and a broken watch. Sarah reached into her blouse and withdrew a small leather pouch, stitched shut with rawhide. "Open it, with force," she repeated. "That's what I was trying to tell you." Ethan sliced the pouch open with his knife. Inside was a tattered notebook and a folded map, its edges stained with what looked disturbingly like dried blood. The notebook contained names, dates, and details, a ledger of murdered landowners stretching back 3 years, and there, halfway down the third page, a name that made his blood run cold. Daniel Reed Cole, 32, April 17th, 1872. "My brother," Ethan said, his voice a low rumble. "How did you—" The conversation fractured as hoofbeats approached from the east. Ethan moved to the window, Winchester in hand. 3 riders approaching fast. The lead rider wore a black coat despite the heat, his pale face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Vaughn Blackwood," Sarah whispered, her hand instinctively moving to cover the notebook. "He calls himself my husband." "Stay inside," Ethan said, checking the Winchester's action with practiced efficiency. 15 rounds in the tube, 1 in the chamber. The familiar weight of the rifle steadied his hands. This isn't your fight anymore. Sarah's laugh was bitter as desert dust. It became my fight when they killed my father for his newspaper, when they forced me to marry that monster to silence both of us. She pulled a small derringer from a hidden pocket. And I don't miss. Outside, the riders halted 20 yards from the cabin. Vaughn Blackwood dismounted with the confident swagger of a man unaccustomed to opposition. The two men flanking him kept their hands near their revolvers. "Cole!" Blackwood's voice carried across the yard. "I know you're in there with my wife. Send her out, and we can discuss this like gentlemen." Ethan stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually across his body, not aimed, but ready. "The lady says she's not your wife, Blackwood." Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The law says otherwise." He squinted, studying Ethan's face. "You look familiar, friend. Have we met?" "We haven't had the pleasure." Ethan's voice was calm, but inside a storm was building. "But you knew my brother, Daniel Cole?" The change in Blackwood's expression was subtle, a flicker of recognition, quickly masked. "Cole? Yes, I remember now. Stubborn fellow. Didn't understand when to keep his mouth shut." The admission hung in the air like gun smoke. One of Blackwood's men shifted nervously in his saddle. "You're on private property," Ethan said. "I suggest you leave." Blackwood's hand drifted toward his holster. "Everything I touch becomes mine eventually, that woman included." The world narrowed to the space between them. Time stretched like molasses. Then the air exploded with gunfire. Ethan fired first, dropping Blackwood's right-hand man before the outlaw could clear leather. The second man got a shot off that splintered the doorframe beside Ethan's head. The Winchester answered, and the man toppled from his horse. Blackwood himself was already retreating, firing wild shots as he mounted his horse. "This isn't over, Cole," he shouted over his shoulder. "I'm coming back with an army." The horses disappeared in a cloud of dust. Ethan reloaded methodically, mind already calculating what would come next. Inside, Sarah was standing by the window, derringer still clutched in her hand. "He never comes alone," she said quietly. "Next time, there'll be at least 10 men. Ethan nodded, examining the cabin's defensibility with a tactician's eye. "Then we'd better be ready." He gestured to the notebook. "Tell me everything." The cabin's single lamp cast long shadows as night fell. Ethan had spent the last hour cleaning and checking his weapons. Both Colts dismantled on the table, each cylinder loaded with fresh rounds, firing pins and springs inspected. The Winchester leaned against the wall, ready. A Bowie knife with a 14-inch blade lay beside an old cavalry saber. Last resorts, but comforting nonetheless. "I was a reporter," Sarah explained, watching him work, "for my father's paper in Denver. We started investigating land grabs along the new railroad routes." She traced a finger along the map. "All these properties had something in common. They sit on gold deposits. Small ones, but valuable. And Blackwood's been killing the owners," Ethan said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded. "He works for Iron Eagle Corporation, a front company buying up land for Eastern investors. When my father printed the story, they burned our press to the ground, with him inside it." Her voice didn't waver, but her knuckles went white around her cup. "Then Blackwood forced me to marry him to keep me quiet and gain control of the paper's assets." "How'd you get away?" "One of Blackwood's men had a conscience, helped me escape." Her eyes hardened. "Blackwood killed him for it, slowly." Ethan's gaze returned to his brother's name in the ledger. "Daniel was surveying land near here last spring. Found something, didn't he? A new vein of gold, the largest discovery in a decade. He came to my father with evidence that Iron Eagle was murdering claim holders." Sarah passed him a folded paper from the notebook. "He drew this map. It shows where the gold is and where the bodies are buried." Ethan unfolded the paper, recognizing his brother's neat handwriting. The realization of what Daniel had discovered and died for settled on him like a physical weight. Not just random violence, but a systematic campaign of murder for profit. Iron Eagle has the sheriff in their pocket, Sarah continued, and the judge, the mayor, everyone who matters. Your brother was gathering evidence for the federal marshals when he disappeared. Ethan was about to respond when a flicker of movement caught his eye through the window, a shadow where none should be. He extinguished the lamp with a quick breath and moved to the wall beside the window, motioning for Sarah to get down. The night exploded into violence. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions, bullets splintering the cabin walls. Ethan counted at least 6 shooters, positioned around the perimeter. He returned fire through the window, the muzzle flash temporarily blinding him in the darkness. "Back door!" he shouted to Sarah over the deafening noise. "There's a ravine 50 yards east. Make for the trees." Sarah crawled toward the rear of the cabin, derringer in hand. Ethan provided covering fire, the Winchester's lever action working smoothly as he sent round after round toward the muzzle flashes surrounding them. A bullet grazed his shoulder, hot pain blooming along his arm. He ignored it, focusing on the rhythm of aim, fire, lever. Repeat. 2 attackers down, maybe 3, but still more coming. The cabin door burst open, and a figure charged through, gun raised. Ethan pivoted, too slow. A shot rang out, but not from the intruder's weapon. The man crumpled, revealing Sarah behind him, her derringer smoking. "I told you I don't miss," she said. They escaped through the back, running low through the ravine as bullets kicked up dirt around them. The darkness and rough terrain provided cover as they made their way to the tree line. Behind them, flames began to consume the cabin, Blackwood's men making sure there was nothing left to return to. Dawn found them 5 miles away, hidden in a dense copse of pine trees overlooking a small creek. Ethan had fashioned a crude shelter of branches while Sarah kept watch. Now, as pink light filtered through the trees, they assessed their situation. "We need allies," Ethan said, wrapping a strip of cloth around his wounded shoulder. "Someone outside Blackwood's influence." "There's a federal judge in Silverdale," Sarah suggested. "William Grant. He's new to the territory. Might not be corrupted yet." Ethan nodded. "Silverdale's a 3-day ride. We'll need horses, supplies." "There's a ranch about 2 miles north," Sarah said. "Owner's name is Hayes. Former cavalry, if the uniform in his window means anything. Might be sympathetic." The Hayes Ranch was a modest spread, with a small herd of cattle grazing nearby. As they approached, a young man emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. His face was fresh-scarred, the mark of recent combat. "That's far enough," he called. "State your business." Ethan raised his hand slowly. "Looking for Joshua Hayes. We're in a tight spot." The young man studied them, taking in their exhausted appearance and Ethan's blood-stained shirt. "You're looking at him. Who's asking?" "Ethan Cole. This is Sarah Blackwell." Ethan lowered his hands carefully. "I rode with the 2nd Colorado Cavalry during the war. Scout Division." Hayes's posture relaxed slightly. "8th Kansas Infantry myself. Saw action at Chickamauga." Military recognition passed between them. The unspoken brotherhood of those who've faced death together. "Come inside. You both look like hell." Hayes's ranch house was simple but well-maintained. Over coffee, strong enough to stand a spoon in, they explained their situation. The young rancher listened without interruption, his expression darkening as the story unfolded. "Iron Eagle," he said when they finished. "They've been pressuring small ranchers all over the county, threatening those who won't sell. A few places have burned mysteriously." He rubbed the scar on his cheek. "Got this defending my property from rustlers who showed up right after I refused their offer." "We need to get to Judge Grant in Silverdale," Sarah said. "He might be our only chance." Hayes nodded. "I can provide horses, supplies, but there's something you should know." He leaned forward, voice dropping. Sheriff Hollister rides through here every few days. He's Iron Eagle's man, does their dirty work, makes problems disappear. As if summoned by his name, hoofbeats approached outside. Hayes moved quickly to the window. "Speak of the devil," he muttered. "It's Hollister. And he's not alone." Sheriff Hollister was a big man with small eyes and a badge that seemed too small for his chest. The two deputies flanking him looked more like hired guns than lawmen. "Deputy Hayes," Hollister called, his voice falsely jovial. "Beautiful morning for a ride." "Sheriff," Hayes acknowledged, stepping onto his porch. Ethan and Sarah remained hidden inside. "What brings you out this way?" "Looking for fugitives," Hollister said, scanning the property. "Dangerous ones. Man and a woman. Killed 3 men last night at the old Murphy place." "Haven't seen anyone," Hayes replied, "but I'll keep an eye out." Hollister's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mind if we take a look around? Just to be thorough." Before Hayes could answer, one of the deputies pointed toward fresh tracks leading to the barn. "Someone's been here, Sheriff." What happened next unfolded with terrible swiftness. Hollister drew his revolver, but Hayes was faster, his rifle already in hand. The first shot caught Hollister in the chest, sending him toppling from his horse. The deputies returned fire as Hayes dove for cover behind a water trough. Inside the house, Ethan grabbed his Winchester and rushed to the door. "Stay down," he told Sarah, though he suspected the command was unnecessary. The woman had proven herself more than capable. The gunfight was brief but brutal. Ethan dropped one deputy with a clean shot through the shoulder, while Hayes wounded the other. But Hollister, despite his chest wound, managed one final shot from the ground. The bullet struck Hayes in the neck, and the young rancher collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. In the aftermath, with the wounded deputies subdued, Ethan knelt beside Hayes. The wound was fatal. They both knew it. The young rancher's breath came in wet gas. "Get to Silverdale," Hayes managed, blood bubbling at his lips. "But watch your backs. Tomorrow night, Iron Eagle is planning something big. A cleansing is what Hollister called it. They're going to eliminate every landowner who won't sell." "We'll stop them," Ethan promised, clasping the dying man's hand. Hayes's eyes were already growing distant. "My horses. Take them. Saddlebags have supplies." His grip tightened momentarily. "Make them pay, Cole. For all of us." Those were his final words. They buried Hayes behind his ranch house, marking the grave with a simple wooden cross. By nightfall, they were riding hard for Silverdale, the dead sheriff's badge tucked in Ethan's pocket, evidence of the corruption they sought to expose. Silverdale emerged from the morning mist like a mirage, a proper town with painted buildings and actual glass windows. The courthouse dominated the main street, its white columns standing in stark contrast to the dusty storefronts surrounding it. "I don't like it," Ethan muttered as they approached. "Too quiet." The streets were indeed unnaturally empty for mid-morning. No shoppers, no workers, just a few solitary figures hurrying along with heads down. The atmosphere was thick with tension. They stabled their horses at the livery and made their way to the courthouse on foot, staying alert for any sign of trouble. Judge Grant's chambers were on the second floor according to the directory. The courthouse interior was cool and quiet, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. A lone clerk looked up nervously as they approached. "We need to see Judge Grant," Sarah said. "It's urgent." The clerk glanced around as if afraid of being overheard. "The judge is unavailable." "It's a matter of life and death," Ethan insisted, placing Hayes's blood-stained badge on the desk. "Federal jurisdiction." The clerk's eyes widened at the sight of the badge. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded toward a side corridor. "Second door on the right, but you didn't hear it from me." The judge's antechamber was luxuriously appointed, with leather-bound books lining the walls and a thick carpet underfoot. A brass nameplate on the mahogany door read, "Honor William Grant, Federal Circuit Judge." Ethan knocked firmly. After a moment, a cultured voice called, "Enter!" Judge William Grant was not what Ethan had expected. Tall and distinguished, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, he projected authority and competence. He looked up from his desk as they entered, showing no surprise at their disheveled appearance. "How may I assist you?" he asked, setting aside his pen. Sarah stepped forward, placing Daniel's notebook on the desk. "My name is Sarah Blackwell. This evidence documents a conspiracy of murder and land theft orchestrated by Iron Eagle Corporation. Over 20 landowners killed for their property." Grant's expression remained neutral as he examined the notebook. "These are serious allegations, Mrs. Blackwell." "They murdered my brother," Ethan added, "Daniel Cole, and they're planning to eliminate more landowners tonight." The judge closed the notebook carefully. "Iron Eagle, you say? Owned by Eastern investors?" Something in his tone changed slightly, a subtle shift that raised the hair on the back of Ethan's neck. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "We need federal marshals, immediately." Grant stood, moving to a cabinet behind his desk. "Of course. This is most disturbing." He withdrew a crystal decanter. "A drink while we discuss the details? You both look as if you could use one." As the judge turned to pour, Ethan noticed something on the desk, partially hidden beneath papers. A company letterhead with a familiar symbol, an eagle clutching a railway spike in its talons, the Iron Eagle logo. In that moment, everything aligned with terrible clarity. Ethan drew his Colt just as Grant turned, derringer in hand. "I'm afraid I can't help you," Grant said, his cultured voice now cold. "Iron Eagle doesn't appreciate interference in its business matters." "You're one of them," Sarah whispered, the betrayal evident in her voice. Grant's smile was thin. "Not just one of them, my dear. I founded Iron Eagle 15 years ago. Those Eastern investors answer to me." He gestured with the derringer. "Now the notebook and map, please. My associates will be here shortly." Outside, hoofbeats approached, many of them. They were out of time. Ethan tensed, calculating angles and distances. Grant noticed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Don't be foolish, Mr. Cole. Even if you somehow manage to shoot me, you'll never leave Silverdale alive." "Maybe not," Ethan acknowledged, "but neither will you." The standoff stretched for one heartbeat, then two. Grant's eyes narrowed. "Your brother made the same mistake. Thought he could be a hero." The judge's words were his undoing. The mention of Daniel broke something loose in Ethan. He moved with the speed of a man half his age, diving sideways as he fired. Grant's derringer discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as the judge staggered back, clutching his chest. "The safe," Sarah said urgently, pointing to a metal box behind the desk. "There must be more evidence inside." Grant, slumped against the wall, gave a bloody chuckle. "Too late," he gasped. "The cleansing, already beginning. By dawn, no witnesses left." Ethan searched the dying man's pockets, finding a small key. The safe yielded its secrets: documents detailing Iron Eagle's operations, lists of bribed officials, and, most damning, telegrams authorizing the murder of landowners who refused to sell. "We need to warn them," Sarah said, stuffing the papers into her bag. "All the ranchers on this list." Ethan nodded, checking his ammunition. "And we need allies, fast." The sun was setting when they reached the first ranch on their list, the Wilson Place, 5 miles outside town. They'd avoided the main roads, taking forest paths to evade Iron Eagle's men searching for them. Frank Wilson, a weathered man with a Civil War veteran's limp, listened to their warning with grim acceptance. "Been expecting something like this," he said. "That's why we formed the Landowners League. 20 of us banded together for protection." "20 won't be enough," Ethan warned. "Iron Eagle has hired guns coming from 3 counties. Wilson's eyes hardened. "Then we'd better gather what we have. The League meets at Jasper's Mill when trouble's brewing." He turned to his eldest son. "Michael, ride to Thomason's and Jenkins. Tell them to spread the word. Everyone at the mill by midnight. By 10 o'clock, 17 men had gathered at the abandoned lumber mill. Ranchers, farmers, and a handful of miners, all armed and grimly determined. Ethan laid out Grant's documents on an old cutting table, illuminated by lantern light. Iron Eagle plans to hit all your properties tonight, he explained. Burn you out, kill anyone who resists, and claim the land through legal proxies afterward. We can't defend everywhere at once, Wilson observed. We don't have to. Ethan pointed to the map. Their forces will gather here at Coyote Crossing before splitting up. If we ambush them there, we control the high ground and the timing. The plan came together quickly, drawing on Ethan's military experience. Defensive positions, fields of fire, fallback points. Some men would create distractions, while others formed the main force. Sarah would take the evidence to the telegraph office in the next county, contacting federal authorities directly. As midnight approached, Ethan found himself standing alone on the mill's porch, looking up at stars scattered like dust across the vast Colorado sky. Sarah approached quietly, touching his arm. You don't have to do this, she said. We have the evidence now. We could just leave. Ethan shook his head. Daniel wouldn't have run. Sarah studied his face in the moonlight. This won't bring him back. No, Ethan agreed, but it might bring him justice. He looked toward the horizon, where distant torches marked Iron Eagle's approaching force. Some fights you can't walk away from. Not if you want to live with yourself afterward. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'll get the evidence through, whatever happens. Their goodbye was brief, a clasping of hands that lingered just a moment too long. Then she was gone, riding east toward safety, while Ethan turned to face the coming storm. Coyote Crossing was a natural bottleneck between two steep hillsides, the only practical route for a large mounted group heading toward the scattered ranches. Ethan and his impromptu militia had positioned themselves along the ridgelines, rifles ready. The Iron Eagle force was larger than expected, nearly 30 riders, Blackwood at their head, torches illuminating their progress through the narrow pass. Ethan waited until they were fully committed to the passage before giving the signal. 3 quick shots fired into the air. Immediately, the night erupted into chaos. Rifle fire rained down from both hillsides. Horses reared and screamed. Men fell. Blackwood shouted orders, trying to rally his forces, but the ambush had achieved complete surprise. Ethan targeted Blackwood specifically, but the man was elusive, ducking behind his horse as bullets kicked up dust around him. The battle shifted as Iron Eagle's men recovered from the initial shock, returning fire and seeking cover. For 10 minutes, the crossing became hell on earth. Muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness, the air thick with gun smoke and the copper scent of blood. Ethan moved among his men, directing fire, plugging gaps in their defense. Then came the moment he'd been waiting for. Blackwood, exposed as he attempted to rally a group of his men for a flanking maneuver. Ethan raised his Winchester, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. Blackwood went down hard, clutching his leg. His men faltered, seeing their leader fall. A second volley from the hillside broke their remaining resolve. Those still able scattered into the night, abandoning their wounded. In the aftermath, as lanterns illuminated the crossing, Ethan approached the wounded Blackwood. The man glared up at him, hatred burning in his eyes. You've lost everything, Blackwood, Ethan said quietly. The evidence is on its way to federal authorities. Iron Eagle is finished. Blackwood's laugh was like broken glass. You think this ends with me? With Grant? There will always be men like us, Cole. The frontier belongs to those with the vision to take it. No, Ethan replied. It belongs to those willing to defend it. He knelt beside Blackwood, close enough that only the dying man could hear his next words. This is for Daniel, and for every other person whose life you stole. Justice, when it came, wasn't as satisfying as Ethan had imagined, but it was final. 3 months later, Ethan stood beside a simple wooden marker on a hillside overlooking what had once been his brother's land claim. The inscription read only, Daniel Reed Cole, brother, seeker of truth, justice found. The aftermath of that night at Coyote Crossing had unfolded better than he dared hope. Sarah had reached the telegraph office, and federal marshals had arrived within days. The evidence proved damning. Iron Eagle's entire operation exposed, its surviving leaders arrested, its holdings redistributed. Sarah had stayed in the territory, reopening her father's newspaper with a dedication to exposing corruption wherever it emerged. Her first major story, the Iron Eagle conspiracy, had been reprinted in papers as far away as New York and Chicago. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew Ethan's attention. Sarah dismounted, wearing practical riding clothes, her hair pulled back beneath a wide-brimmed hat. She looked more at ease than he'd ever seen her. "I thought I'd find you here," she said, joining him beside the grave. She placed a small bundle of wildflowers against the marker. "Just saying goodbye," Ethan replied. "Heading north tomorrow. Heard there might be trouble brewing in Dakota territory." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. "Another fight that needs fighting?" "Something like that." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western mountains. The land around them was changing. New fences, new buildings, the steady encroachment of civilization. But the essential wildness remained, a promise of both danger and opportunity. "He would be proud," Sarah said finally, "of what you did, what we all did." Ethan nodded, words unnecessary between them now. Some bonds were forged in fire, tempered by shared purpose and sacrifice. Not love exactly, or not yet, but something equally powerful, understanding. As the shadows lengthened across Daniel's grave, Ethan made his peace with the past and turned his face toward whatever waited beyond the horizon. Sometimes a man had to stand and fight not just for his own land, but for something greater. Daniel had understood that, and now so did he. The frontier might be tamed someday, but not today. And until then, there would always be need for men willing to stand against the darkness, with courage, with conviction, and with guns if necessary. That was Ethan Cole's legacy now, and it was enough.